I am always surprised, even in New York City, which has such a large maritime footprint, how many people who live in the city don't even realize that they're in a maritime environment, that we have this much shipping. That, I mean, to me, it's even like most people don't know that the Coast Guard is even in New York City, and that we are, in fact, when you are down there in Brooklyn and you're watching ships come under the Verrazano Bridge, that we're out there, we're, inspecting these vessels for all kinds of things, So I think we just talk about it. We continue to make appearances at schools when we can, and just be our lovely selves out there in the world, talking about our cool jobs.
Welcome to the Shipping Podcast, where I meet interesting maritime professionals sharing their passion for the shipping industry and their everyday job. I am your host. My name is Lena. Hello, Shipping Podcast listeners, and welcome to episode 135. I would like to start by apologizing that this episode was not released last Friday, the day when the Shipping Podcast usually is released. It's released now. I hope you can oversee that I missed the deadline. It was actually the first time in almost 5 years that I missed the deadline. But we all know that there is a pandemic going on, and that has also affected my work with the podcast. I needed to understand the best way to conduct interviews online. You know that I usually do my interviews in person, and that has probably been part of the secret sauce to the success of the Shipping Podcast, I think. And then I needed to find people who have the time to speak to me now. And on top of that, I have to feel like doing this. A lot of components to get into gear, but I'm all set to go now. The sound quality is maybe not as good as when I sit down with my guests and use my podcast microphones, but I think it's good enough. The main point is that you get to listen to another maritime professional who's talking about their passion about the shipping industry. I managed to get hold of Lieutenant Commander Sarah Brennan of the US Coast Guard, who actually jumped into her car in New York last week and connected with me over Zoom. Sarah is the Deputy of Safety and Security Operations, where she's in charge of port state control, regulated waterfront facilities and containers. She's also the cyber security liaison for Sector New York. I give you Sarah Brennan. Hello, Sarah. Welcome to the Shipping Podcast.
Hello.
Could you please introduce yourself?
Yes, my name is Sarah Brennan, and I am a Lieutenant Commander in the United States Coast Guard.
And how did you come in contact with shipping?
Oh, well, it's just like almost every one of your other stories from your other guests that you've had. I just fell into it like everybody else does. I grew up in Denver, Colorado, just outside of Denver. I was a 4-H kid. I don't know if you know anything about 4-H, but it's basically, you can do several projects, but it mostly revolves around livestock. and I specifically used to show horses and dogs and things like that. And I just knew that I wanted to do something with animals. That was my goal in life, animals. And I found out about Texas A&M University at Galveston, in Galveston, Texas. It is part of the Texas A&M campus. And they had one of these great marine biology programs. So I thought, okay, I'm going to go study marine biology. I'll hope to one day work at SeaWorld or be some kind of animal caregiver. That was my sort of goal. And at the time, so Texas A&M University also has a maritime academy, Texas Maritime. They had a training ship at the time, which was the summer of 1999, called the Texas Clipper II. That was their training ship. And they would take 50, I think it was, maybe there was 50 of us. That might be more than there was. So hard to remember now, that went as summer cadets. So you're not in the maritime academy at that point. You're just on the ship to have this experience, and you take 2 classes while you're on board. So I took a history course and a writing course on board the vessel. So gone for 8 weeks. We traveled all over the world. We went transatlantic. It was so fun. And I just fell in love with ships at that point. Just being out at sea. I had never experienced anything like that. Just being such a small being out in the middle of the ocean where you see nothing but water and the people that you're on the ship with. So we came back that summer. I continued to do marine biology. I did not join the Maritime Academy, but I always just kind of stuck. The ships just sort of stuck in my head forever. And I, of course, became very good friends with several people who did go into the Maritime Academy. So I was always kind of connected. Went through school, ended up changing my major to a resources degree, which focused a lot more on, petroleum, fisheries, that kind of thing. And in my senior year of college, I was a research assistant for one of my professors. And there was a Coast Guard lieutenant who she had brought in to teach incident command system, which is a structure that we use in the government to respond to all kinds of natural disasters or big events, so we can have a coordinated response and a focused, where everybody knows what's going on kind of response to events. And took that course. He then offered 2 spots to a course called HAZ-WOPR, which is a week long. And in this week-long course, you go all the way through a bunch of different ICS classes, and you don, firefighting equipment and respirators and things like that. And there were a ton of other Coast Guard members in this course. So some of them being my age, I got to know them, became friends, and they're like, "Oh, you should join the Coast Guard." And I was like, there's no way I'm ever going to join the Coast Guard. And then I kind of sat and I thought about it, and I learned more about it. And that they have Coast Guard cutters that are out there on the sea doing fisheries missions, search and rescue, migrant interdiction, drug interdiction, all those kinds of fun stuff. And I finally made the decision to join. And I applied for officer candidate school and was accepted after I graduated from college, and went in 2004 to officer candidate school. So never was the goal to be in the military. But once I made that decision to join the military, or the Coast Guard specifically, I had to make it happen. And then when I got into officer candidate school, I wanted nothing more than to be on a ship, on a Coast Guard cutter. So that was my first job in the Coast Guard.
So why were you hesitant to start with? You said never in a million years I will go join the Coast Guard. Why not?
I don't know. It's funny because my mom was in the Navy. My father was in the Navy. They weren't career. They did, their time and got out after a few years. They didn't stay in for the full 20. I don't know why. I think maybe it was the idea, this is going to sound so ridiculous, but I think it may have been just the rigidity and the uniform and the hair back and my perception at the time was just yelling and telling people what to do kind of thing, which is not the case. It is when you go through training, but there's obviously a lot of room for being thoughtful and coming up with your own solutions and stuff like that. So I think maybe it was just the rigidity that kind of scared me, but talking and getting to know more people and really the missions of the Coast Guard and what they're all about is what made me want to join. And then, of course, the environmental aspect. I had been studying this in college for so long. The idea that I could actually go out and help enforce fisheries regulations out on the high seas was something that intrigued me a lot. So once I learned that was part of it, I was like, I'm in, let's go.
So, and then when did you graduate?
So I graduated from Texas A&M in 2004. I went to officer candidate school that same year. and graduated from Officer Candidate School in July of 2004. And I've been in ever since.
So what have you been doing since then?
So my first 2 tours were on Coast Guard cutters. So my first cutter was the Coast Guard cutter Vigorous, which was out of Cape May, New Jersey at the time. And when I was on that vessel, we did 5 patrols in the North Atlantic. These are about 5 to 6 week patrols. So you're out for a month and a half or so, and then you come back for about the same amount of time.
So how big is a boat like that?
Yeah. So the medium endurance cutter, so they are 210 feet long. So not big at all. With a crew of, I think we had 75 to 80 people at the time. So a lot of people crammed onto that ship, but you're busy every day. If we're not out doing fisheries boardings or looking for something, then we're doing drills and training and, learning and continuing to, keep our skills sharp. So that was my first cutter. And we did 5 North Atlantic patrols and 2 in the Caribbean. Had some really fun cases that varied from different fisheries kind of cases to, we did have a couple of migrant interdictions. And one cool that I got to be involved with was a prize crew of one of our other units had found a vessel with a lot of drugs that were inbound to the United States. And we helped them, that team, drive that ship that they found with the drugs on it back to the U.S. to carry out the rest of that case. And my second ship was on a patrol boat, the Coast Guard cutter Adak, which is 110 feet. And there were 22 of us on that ship. And that was over in the Persian Gulf. And we have patrol boats over there that are part of the coalition. And our main mission over there is just to protect the oil platforms and conduct security boardings of the tankers that are coming in and out of there. And that was a wild year because I was the only female on that ship. It was the best and the worst times. It was everything that I could love and hate about the Coast Guard was all wrapped up in that one year, and just a hell of an experience. So I'm so glad that I did that. But once I was on that ship, that was my second ship. So that was year 3. I knew I was very drawn then back to the environmental side of the Coast Guard, and became very interested in what we call marine safety. So the marine safety or prevention side of the Coast Guard prevention mission, which is more of your vessel inspections, marine casualty investigations, waterways management, all those types of missions where we would be hoping to prevent a disaster, right? So I got into inspections, was stationed from the Coast Guard cutter Adak to Houston, Texas, which was great because I got to go back. A bunch of my college friends were still there in Texas. So it was nice to be sort of going home in a way, and got qualified to do inspections there on our regulated waterfront facilities. So those facilities and terminals that accept foreign flag vessels and U.S. flag vessels. And then that was when the Transportation Worker Identification Credential, the TWIC card, hit. So that was so the people in the U.S. will know exactly what that is and why that was a significant time for prevention in the Coast Guard. And then also started inspecting foreign flagged vessels, so freight vessels in Houston. And then after Houston, went to Houma, Louisiana. I never knew about Houma, Louisiana before then, even having gone to school in Texas, but it is in the Gulf South, obviously. And I never realized that there was like a south of New Orleans. Like, who knew, right? So I was stationed there in Houma, really got to know the oil industry there, obviously, and all the offshore supply vessels. And then I became a marine casualty investigator in Houma, Louisiana. So that's where you're, inspecting vessels after they have had collisions or elisions with things that don't move, any casualty or injury to a person. We investigate all of those types of events. So that's what I was doing in Houma. Left Houma for industry training. It's a program that we have where we send Coast Guard members out into industry or another government agency to learn how they're doing operations. And then it helps us bring that knowledge back into the Coast Guard. And then we can help put that knowledge into those industry partners and just create better relationships between us, right? So that's the sort of the goal of industry training. And for my year of industry training, I actually went and worked for the Bureau of Safety and Environmental Enforcement, which is the offshore industry. So if you think about it, like the Coast Guard really has the drill platform of an oil rig. So we have the platform and up. So life-saving, those kinds of, the mariners themselves and that kind of, those types of issues. And then BSEE, the Bureau of Safety and Environmental Enforcement, has the platform down. So the drill string, the blowout preventers, like all the operations that are happening underneath the platform there. So that was, when I went to BSEE, that was shortly after the events of Deepwater Horizon. And the goal there was to help build our relationship between the Coast Guard and BSEE to hope to be able to streamline investigations as we moved forward in areas that we shared jurisdiction, like on an oil platform. And that was pretty successful, I think. We made a lot of connections between our two organizations, and I just had a blast with those investigators and really got to know them well, and I'm great friends with a lot of them still to this day.
I don't know how it works. Do you apply for where you want to go, or does someone tell you what you are going to do?
Yeah, it's kind of a little of both. So there's a lot of pieces to it, but you can choose, but you can only choose between what's available to you that year. So every year in August, the detailers, the assignment officers, these are the people that help place, they're basically like human resources type jobs where they are placing coasties into different billets around the country and around the world. So in August, they will release this list of what's available to you based on your specialty and your rank. And then you can pick from that list where you would like to go. And you rank them like 1 through however many you put down on your list. You will not necessarily get what's number 1, 2, or 3, but I think the goal of an assignment officer is to place you somewhere that is on your list, provided that you are qualified for that job in every way, meaning performance-wise, qualification-wise, and just rank and time and service and all those types of things. So our normal rotations are, depending on what your specialty is, it can be anywhere from 2 to 4 years that you transfer. Most of my transfers have been on a 3-year cycle. So you begin the process in August when the dream sheet is released. You rank those picks, and then you will be placed from, that's due in September. We usually find out sometime after Christmas where we're going. So you go through that every 3 years or so. So this was a transfer year for me. I last August started my list, and then we got orders this last February back to Washington, D.C.
Okay, so
we'll be transferring, yeah.
Did you talk about what you do right now? What's your specialty? What are you doing now?
Yeah, so I am a prevention officer and a marine inspector. So I am qualified there. Let me just say that there are people that are much more qualified even than I am. I think because I did 2 tours afloat, so I'm a little bit behind some of the other prevention officers who started right away. But I am qualified to do foreign freight, foreign passenger vessels. I can do domestic, like our U.S. flagged, a couple of different platforms under the U.S. flag. I am qualified to do those. I'm a fully qualified marine investigator, and also a waterfront facilities inspector. So I can do any of those things. Right now, as I serve in New York, I am a journeyman marine inspector, which means just a more qualified marine inspector. But I don't really get to get out. They don't let me out of the office much these days, unfortunately. I still get to do cruise ships just because it takes a big team to inspect a cruise ship. So I always very much look forward to cruise ship season because I get to get out of the office some more. But I am specifically in charge now of the port state control facilities and container division at Sector New York. And I have about 43 people in that division, and we cover all of those exams. So we do somewhere between 650 and 700 foreign flagged safety exams per year. And we are normally vetting, meaning screening vessels as they come in for exams or anything they might need, about 4,000 a year. So it's an insane amount of arrivals that we have.
Sarah, this is so cool. I didn't know how important you were.
I believe me, I am not important. I am just trying to keep it all together, and thankfully I work for and with some just truly amazing people. My direct supervisor, his name is John Hillen. He has been a civilian for the Coast Guard since the mid 80s, and he is an engineer, and he has been in the Port of New York since then. And he just is like the best to learn from, because he's seen it all. The guy has seen it all. He's lived in New York through it all. And he's a great person to learn from. So I'm very thankful to be coming up under him. And especially a job like this that is so big. The leadership aspect of it too, having this many people and managing that and their needs and stuff is really been a really fun time.
So what will you do in Washington, D.C.? What will be your job there?
So I was selected to be an assignment officer. So one of those people that now helps put people in their new billets, which to me is I don't know how to say this I don't mean to be, I just think it sounds like kind of gloaty to say it this way, but it's a highly revered position. It is considered what we call a special assignment. So I was really taken aback and surprised when I got assigned as assignment officer, just because I didn't see that coming. I really didn't. I didn't see it coming, but it'll be fun. It'll be cool to see that side, the more human resource side of management in our organization. How those decisions are being made behind the curtain, and how all that stuff works, and how we play into everything. So I'm excited for the opportunity for sure, but it's going to be a little bit overwhelmed and a little bit scared, but I think it'll be okay.
So what are the biggest changes that you have seen, during your career when it comes to the shipping industry?
For shipping? For shipping in general, all of this, I just love that the shipping industry really seems to lead on some of these environmental issues. Really do. With IMO 2020, the ballast water management, and I know that that's been a real headache for the shipping industry, and I know that complying with those rules and coming up with innovative solutions is difficult. But I love that about this industry. Everybody thinks so hard about how to solve these issues in an innovative way. And I just love being a part of that. And I love that, like if you look around on cruise ships, right? Like most of them are single-use plastics, can't find them. Most of the cruise lines are phasing that stuff out, and everybody's got scrubbers, and I just love that they're working so hard to solve environmental issues. LNG being such a big thing now, I got to go through an LNG course recently in Jacksonville, Florida, and learn more about, facility to vessel bunkering of LNG, vessel to vessel bunkering of LNG. This technology is so cool. It's so cool to be able to see that and to learn about it. So I think those are like the big changes, like those types of engineering changes are like the big ones that I've noticed in terms of, environmental. And just, when I was stationed in the Gulf of Mexico, just the the things they have vessels doing out in the Gulf of Mexico and the oil fields, it's truly amazing what they can get these vessels to do. The amount of technology that they use to drill, to find, to extract, all the things that they're doing out there. It's really amazing. You
and I have met through VISTA.
Yes.
Women's International Shipping and Trading Association. And you are part of the diversity committee.
Yes.
Maybe we should talk a little bit about that.
Okay.
Why did you enter? Why did you raise your hand when you were asked to become a member of the diversity committee?
Well, so it's something, as a female in the military, it is obviously something that I think a lot about. I was also looking for a way to be more involved in WISTA not even at the international level. I just wanted to, because I had been going to all these events. I'd been to the international AGMs, the USA AGMs, and just seeing all these cool ladies doing cool stuff. And I just wanted to kind of, get in there and be as much a part of it as I could. So when the opportunity for the diversity committee came up, I had reached out to our USA president at the time. Well, she still is, Parker Harrison. We all know and love Parker Harrison. And I just said, hey, this is something I'm interested in. What do you think? And she's like, yeah, let's put your name in the hat, see what happens. So I was able to be a part of that, which has been so cool. I've done a lot of collaboration type things with other agencies and in the Coast Guard, but I had not worked with women from other countries that are so smart and successful in that way. And we weren't even talking about our businesses, right? Like we were talking about this particular issue of diversity and inclusion. So such a cool opportunity, but I feel like all opportunities come to you with just raising your hand, right? You just, let me do that. I'll try it out. I think I can help here.
I totally agree.
So that's fine.
And I also felt humbled because we were, I think, 15 women from different countries.
Mm-hmm.
And it also makes you stop and think about, maybe it's different if I was living in another country or if I was part of another culture or things like that.
Mm-hmm.
So we had to agree on a mutual level of how we want to achieve more diversity in the maritime community. I thought that was eye-opening for me as well.
Oh, it was huge for me too. I mean, we are in America, I think, we're like loud and we're, very outspoken about these issues. And my biggest lesson from being on the diversity committee was that's just not the case for women living in other countries. They may not have the same response from that outspokenness. And even I tell this story all the time, but coming down to just simple words that we were using in that pledge had to be changed because some cultures and countries, and I wish I could remember now what the word was. I cannot remember what it was, but it was something, and one of the ladies had brought up, if you use that word, men will be offended. And to me, I was like, well, that's silly. That's something we would use in normal conversation, but it just wasn't the case. And I think that was the big lesson for me, was just how cognizant you have to be of everyone's culture if you really want this to work. And you have to work at everyone else's pace. So what may specifically work here in the United States doesn't work for everybody. So let's drill down on that as much as we can to get to a place where every one of our cultures can agree that this is like the right place to go.
I think I'm also very proud of the pledge. I will put a link to it in the show notes because I think we really got a good document out of that. And
yes.
Almost 3,000 people have signed it.
Mm-hmm.
Even companies have signed it. As for instance, I think Cargill signed it, all of them, to say we will not participate in panels in conferences where there are only men.
Right. And you have been such a champion for that, Lena. I mean, really. And I always am conscious of that one fact, because I remember, I think it must have been you that mentioned it long enough ago that we were sure to put that in the pledge. That was part of the guidelines that we had included in there, was to, make a conscious effort to only participate in panels that include women. And then more so than that, if you're organizing a panel, then find women to be on that panel.
Yeah. It's not good enough in this time, 2020, to say she was not able to make it.
Right.
I mean, there must be more than one to choose from.
Right. Oh, yeah. Yes. And there are. We know that for sure, right?
We know so many great women who know so many good things, and they are good speakers, and they have things to say if people want to listen to them.
Yes, of course.
So how do you think we should make the shipping industry more visible? How can we do that?
It's a tough question, because it's funny to me. I think we just have to keep talking about it and telling people that don't know about it more about it, because I am always surprised, even in New York City, which has such a large maritime footprint, how many people who live in the city don't even realize that they're in a maritime environment, that we have this much shipping. That, I mean, to me, it's even like most people don't know that the Coast Guard is even in New York City, and that we are, in fact, when you are down there in Brooklyn and you're watching ships come under the Verrazano Bridge, that we're out there, we're, inspecting these vessels for all kinds of things, So I think we just talk about it. We continue to make appearances at schools when we can, and just be our lovely selves out there in the world, talking about our cool jobs. I think that's really the best way to do it. I don't know how we would advertise more, I guess, but
I don't think we can. In a way, I think crisis like the one we are in now maybe will open the eyes of people about the important job that the maritime industry is contributing with to my everyday life, to everyone's life.
Oh, yeah.
Someone said the same thing about Brexit. All of a sudden, United Kingdom realized that they were an island.
Yeah. Yeah. No, for sure. And I think, I've personally had that thought with, during my time in the Gulf of Mexico. I mean, we responded to several hurricanes, and we've all seen in recent history here in the United States, we had a couple of summers of a lot of hurricanes. And I think that's like when people learn a lot about our organization, the Coast Guard, but also how much the seafarers and the people, the piloting, the people that drive these ships, that operate these vessels, mean to our economy, and how important it is that we keep those channels open to get that cargo in, because it's everything, right? It's not just your paper towels and your shoes, it's your gas, and it's, it's everything. It's everything.
Yeah. Who do you think I should interview the next? Who would you be interested in listening to?
I know this is your question, Lena, and I was thinking about this. So I think there are some very cool people. Well, you have interviewed several of my WISTA heroes, so good job with those ladies. There is a couple of women that I have worked with recently on cyber type issues. One is Natasha Cohen from the Department of Homeland Security. She does a lot of cool cyber stuff and is very interested in cyber and maritime. There's also, I believe her name is Karen Bolton. She's with Netitude over at Lloyd's. She does a lot of really cool cyber stuff, really interesting lady. And then there's some Coast Guard heroes, of course, that I have, but I don't know how many coasties you want to interview. But I would be more interested to know Captain Burdian, who's the current captain of the port down in Miami, at Sector Miami in Florida. And, she was at Congressional Affairs for the Coast Guard for a long time, and she just runs at a very high speed. There's so many people out there that are so cool.
Yeah, in a way, I mean, I can take the opportunity now to interview people which I wouldn't normally be able to travel and see. Mm-hmm. So I will try and get some even more interesting people on now than I usually do, but we'll see what I can do. Did you have a role model? Well, you mentioned that your parents were in the Navy when you were a small child. So did you have a role model? besides them, or were they your role models? Or
I don't know that I really had role models for the military specifically. I mean, my mom, of course, our moms are our heroes, right? She was never pushy about the military or any one career track. She just was like, so supportive of anything that I wanted to do, but also expected a lot. If you're going to get into this, you're going to be the best at it, and you're going to really follow everything through. So I think that she instilled that dedication and that perseverance in me from a very young age. And then honestly, somebody I think about a lot is Dr. Von Jaren, I was her research assistant in college, and she was always her demeanor was like very much like conduct yourself in a certain way, learn as much as you can, read as much as you can, and everything else will fall into place. She was such an advocate for all of her students and just being professional. And I think that's something that sticks out to me. And then, honestly, one of my greatest and most trusted mentors is a man, and it's Admiral Paul Thomas, who I've known in the Coast Guard since the day I joined the Coast Guard. And I've had the opportunity to work for him again as a flag officer. And he's a very trusted advisor to me, and somebody that I bounce all my career moves off of, just to make sure I'm kind of on track. And then, of course, I am just in awe of the women that belong to WISTA. Every time I go to another AGM, I'm just like, man, look at these. We're just out here doing amazing stuff. And these women are building these companies out of nothing, and just amazing leaders, great people, just very great humans, and just happy to know all of them and be a part of it,
I am in agreement with my guest again. I usually am. Yeah, I feel honored and I think that I'm lifting myself just being around those incredible women. So I agree with you.
Yes.
Thank you, Sarah. I will leave you to go out and protect New York.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I'll do my best.
I'm so grateful that you were able to make it on this podcast, and I hope to see you soon. Take care.
Yeah, hopefully once all this stuff gets back together, we'll be able to see each other at a conference very soon.
And a virtual hug until then. Thank you for listening to the Shipping Podcast. Don't forget to tell everyone that you meet that there is a shipping podcast available, and that they should download it and listen to the maritime professionals who are sharing their passion for the shipping industry.